Okay, I'm going to try to say something useful or insightful or both or maybe neither about land clearing. So, most of you will be familiar with the, I guess, the concerns about land clearing in Queensland, right? So, if you're not, there is, Queensland probably has one of the highest rates of land clearing in any developed country in the world. This is a graph of land clearing in Queensland, and most of the concerns revolve around the effectiveness and implementation of the Vegetation Management Act. So, Vegetation Management Act, so this is showing from 1995 to 2013, and then the rates of clearing in Queensland. So the Vegetation Management Act was introduced in 1999 in response to very high levels of land clearing, and it was first introduced to prevent clearing on leasehold land, later extended to freehold land, and then over time it's been gradually strengthened. Okay, so in 2006 there was a ban on broad-scale vegetation clearing for agriculture. 2009 there was a introduction of a ban on sort of clearing of high-value regrowth. Then in 2012 we got a new government and a Liberal government, and they decided they were going to relax a lot of these regulations, and in 2013 basically weakened those 2006 and 2009 regulations, essentially allowing broad-scale clearing for agriculture and reversing the ban on clearing of high-value regrowth. So there's been a concern about this, and essentially the VMA has been relatively effective until here, and relaxation of those rules. But no one's really looked at the extent to which the VMA has been effective at really protecting very rare vegetation communities. So the Vegetation Management Act essentially has 3 levels of protection. It defines these as least concern, which is essentially those vegetation communities that have greater than 30% of their remaining extent, original extent. Of concern are the vegetation communities with between 10 and 30 remaining of original extent, and endangered, which is the ones that are really rare, less than 10% remaining of original extent. And the way the Vegetation Management Act works is that the more highly impacted over time, the ones with the highest cumulative impacts, should get the highest protection, right? So based on this, you would expect that the of concern endangered should be protected more highly, should have lower clearing rates than the least concern. Well, if you thought that, you'd be wrong. Okay, I'm going to go forward. This is an illustration of the clearing rates for the different Vegetation Management Act classes. So the black line, so these are the years from 1999, the introduction of the VMA, up until 2011, before the relaxation of the legislation. And the black line are the clearing rates. These are percentages, so I've standardized by the percentage of amount cleared. Black line is the least concern, so these are, and then the blue and the green line are the clearing rates for of concern and endangered. So as you can see, there's been a successful reduction in the percent cleared, annual percent cleared, but what you'll notice is that even though in relative terms the legislation is relatively strong by international standards, the of concern and endangered, so our most threatened vegetation communities, are still being cleared much more highly than the least concern, up to 6 times as high. And that hasn't changed. In fact, more recently, the ratio has actually increased. So, what does this mean? Well, if we want to protect our most threatened ecosystems, we really need to be able to have legislation that when the cumulative impacts get high enough, that legislation prevents further clearing. So we might want to see something like this, where we see some loss as the vegetation communities get more threatened and the cumulative impact gets higher. The legislation should kick in to protect those. The Vegetation Management Act doesn't seem to do that. It doesn't protect those endangered ecosystems more highly than the more common ecosystems. And so we may get a situation like this, where we get continuing increase, it's incremental increase, so death by 1,000 cuts, and eventual potential loss of those vegetation communities. And that's what I'm going to say. It's all original. It's essentially classed as original vegetation. So remnant is original. So it's essentially intact.
I'm thinking remnant and regrowth. Sorry.
Yeah, we didn't consider regrowth here. Yeah, so this is really the original intact vegetation communities. And so there is regrowth, but in some vegetation communities it can be as valuable as the original, but in some it can't. So there is an argument that we should be protecting the intact vegetation communities as well, not just relying on regrowth. So yeah, so it is offset to some extent by regrowth, but yeah, it doesn't go into that threatened category. Yeah.
Have you looked at agricultural suitability? Presumably the reason that the clearing of concern and endangered is a bit high is because they've been the areas that have been targeted.
Yeah.
Continue to be targeted.
That's right. So they've got the highest threats. Yeah.
Hasn't been cleared because it's less suitable for agriculture.
Yeah.
That'll vary a little bit. You know, have you run an analysis where you looked at by regional ecosystem type and then?
I haven't yet, but I'm just crunching the numbers to look at the regional variation.
To look at agricultural suitability as a layer on top of that.
Yeah. Well, I haven't done it yet. First of all, just looking at the regional variation and that. But you're right. I think the threat is higher, but it still means that the VMA is not protecting those. These are the things we really care about. There's hardly any left of them, and we're not protecting them. So, but you're right. The reason probably is a combination of there are permitted activities to clear those ecosystems, and plus the threat. Yeah.
We hope there'll be a better news evening after next month, or this month now, isn't it?
That's right.
There's a group of us going to be talking to Jackie Trout and others about the failure of the current government to implement their election policy to reinstitute controls.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether that will have any. I think that because they didn't publish the stats data for a long time, the previous government stopped it. Current government said they would bring it in. They didn't for a long time. It's now available, and I think people were shocked by the amount that it spiked.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit more pressure to actually.
That's right. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. But this sort of result, even before the relaxation, these patterns are still there.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's probably a flaw in the mechanism of the way that legislation works, rather than it's part of it might be lack of implementation, I guess, and just following.
Well, did I understand you right? Did you say that within the protection of endangered habitats, there's exemptions for particular activities?
There are some exemptions. I mean, it's a case-by-case approval process. So you put in if it's accessible, then it goes. You have to put in an application for approval, and some of these just get approved. And they can get approved. They can be legitimate approvals under the Act. I mean, there's exemptions for a range of things. I think if it's a small enough size, for instance, urban development is less restricted. A range of exemptions, and although those exemptions are lower, there are fewer exemptions, and the most threatened for the most threatened ecosystems, there still are some exemptions.
So it's a discretionary decision that's theoretically limited. Discretion is theoretically limited to a list of exemptions.
I guess so, but I think there's always a get-out clause if it's in the national interest or those sorts of things. Yeah.
The high value regrowth is essentially classified on age, isn't it?
Based on age.
If you haven't been not cleared since 1980.
I think so. Yeah, Clive might know more than me.
Increasing the permanency of regrowth.
I don't know.
Like critical things. Having regrowth get old enough so it then classifies as top.
Don't know. No, I mean you could probably do the analysis with the data. So the regrowth's mapped and the changing regrowth's mapped. So you probably have.
The ephemeral nature of regrowth.
Yeah, that's right.
If it's by age,
That'd be worth doing.
that swing state would change over time and not be fixed. Otherwise, eventually, I think it's just, if it hadn't taken very long international law, anything from 1981, and there wasn't like they didn't do it for regional ecosystem basis, they just did it high value. But yeah, that's going to make sense. Is that based on SLATS data?
Yeah, it's just SLATS data. With what? Which data is it? Oh yes, right. I haven't. Yeah.
You can't shut that off.
No. But yeah.
Does the legislation consider the absolute area of the various types of vegetation? So does it protect vegetation that was originally rare,
Yes.
even if it hasn't been seriously degraded yet?
Yes, it does. So things that have a very low spatial extent. So I generalised a little bit there by saying those percentages. There are other ways in which a vegetation community can get into those categories, and one of them is that it's just rare. Yeah, that's another way.